Hello, and welcome to the BOFIN Buzz, the podcast for anyone fascinated by farming's future. Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of the BOFIN Buzz. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Tim May from Kingsclere Estate in Berkshire. Tim, good morning. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Tom.
Fantastic. Now, Tim, I'm really excited to hear. I've been to your places, and you've got an awful lot of really exciting things going on there, which I hope we're going to explore in this podcast. But first of all, I'd just like to ask you if there were three key things that you want to have or set about changing in your farming system. What would they be?
Hi, Tom. Yeah, so I'm thinking that the three things that we try to focus on our business are all around the three pillars of sustainability. So we're thinking about how we can influence the people, how we can influence the profit, and how we can influence the planet positively to help us as a business go forward and help. That's kind of become our main focus now since I did the Nuffield 10 years ago, thinking of looking into sustainability. So,
No, absolutely. No, and we'll talk about that as well. So, yeah, people, planet, and profit. Let's explore those areas in more detail, because I mean, they underpin every business really. So that's an excellent choice. But first of all, I just want to understand a little bit more about you, Tim. So first of all, what actually got you into farming? Why did you come into farming? What's your interest there?
So Kingsclere Estates is our family business. So I'm the fourth generation involved in it, and I was born and played on the farm from a nipper, and it's always kind of been there in the blood really. I went to Brymore School down in Somerset, which is a farming secondary school. It was milking cows and feeding pigs in the morning before school when I was sort of 13, 14, and moved on through college, university, and international travels and all that sort of thing. And can't see myself being employable in any other industry actually.
No, so farming is very much in the blood for you then, Tim. And now, and you went and did a Nuffield 10 years ago, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, just describe,
right,
why was that important for you? Why did you want to do that?
I probably wouldn't be able to answer that at the time, but I was challenged on my personal development, and someone said, "Well, what do you do? How do you take yourself forward personally, and that sort of thing?" And didn't really have an answer, and they said, "Well, Nuffield is a thing for personal development," and I sort of explored it, and ended up getting getting awarded a scholarship. And
who
what I've
paid for the who paid for the scholarship?
It was actually a private lady who had some funds. She was a scholar herself in history, and she actually put some money up to help them. So there's some scholarships that are definitely like pig breeders or wheat breeders or something, and there's some that are just very much more generic and just someone that they think that is worth investing in, and that was the category I fell into. I was quite young, as I was one of the younger scholars at the time, but what it gave me was permission to go and change how I farmed, because I was sort of rubbing shoulders with all these people that were doing amazing things on their farms, and were sort of bucking the trend, and it gave me permission to go back and buck the trend a bit more. So I was having some thought about how our farming was going already, and but not actually doing anything different about it. And because I was sort of surrounded by this mindset of entrepreneurialism and changing and all that sort of stuff, it really gave me permission to get on and do the same thing. So that's the biggest thing that it gave me.
Yeah, no. So I've talked to quite a few people who have been on Nuffields, and for those people listening, if you don't know what a Nuffield is, it's an award that's given by the Nuffield Society. farming society, I think it's called, and you can basically, it gives you a fund to travel the world and find out extraordinary things about particular farming systems, whatever farming system that interests you. And you then come back and I believe you write up a report and so on. And as you say, you do meet, the other Nuffield scholars that you're with. All of you are an extraordinary bunch. I have to say, I came across it too late in my farming career, but I think there is a cutoff date beyond which you can't do a Nuffield. You're too old, basically. And one of my regrets is that I never did a Nuffield. But those who I've met who have done one have been very, very inspirational people. So I know it's been great. But as far as you're concerned, Tim, was it a bit of a sort of light bulb moment when you said that it gave you permission, which I think is a really interesting thing to say, about how you change your farming system at home. So let's talk about that. And in fact, I think it kind of ties in with one of your P's at least. Well, it probably ties in with all of them. But let's talk about profit.
Yeah.
First of all, and let's look at that particular focus area. But so obviously, you wanted to come back to the family farm, change things, and so on. What were the particular elements that you wanted to change about the farm at home then?
So when I was looking, particularly more when I was doing the Nuffield, so I'd been at home already for 10 years, been farming very conventionally, doing pretty okay at it. We had a direct drill on the farm since like 1996, so the direct drilling and no-till was all kind of what we were underway doing anyway. But I sort of came back from Nuffield and really started thinking about how our business was performing financially, and we saw that, sort of started exploring it, and I never really had delved into the impacts of inflation on our business and what that was doing to us as and eroding our sort of bottom lines and everything else. And when I really started to explore that, I kind of thought this monocrop agriculture is just doesn't really fit with that inflationary environment we're in, because I said, well, we got pretty flat yields. Our cost of yield was going up. Achieving that yield was going up through partly because chemical costs were going up in line with fuel and everything else, but also because we were getting more disease resistance and weed resistance and everything else. Everything was going up in cost wise. Our yields were pretty flat. The prices weren't really matching any of that increase in inflation. So even if we were doing nothing, we would be sort of stable or going downhill in income. But then you put that income against agricultural inflation at sort of standard inflation plus a few percent, and we're really not really achieving a great deal. So I thought, well, that's not sustainable. That's not how we can go forward in our business. So started to review that financial position and started to think, well, we've got this abundance of sunlight and water hitting our ground, and are we making the most out of that? And that's the free stuff. And let's sort of turn around and see what we can do to make more from that free stuff before we start spending money on inputs.
So that took you down the organic route, is that right? Or not
it did eventually. Yeah, it took us down the route of putting grassland into the system. So adding to add diversity and get more soil health coming through the grassland.
Sure.
I'd seen this idea of enterprise stacking while I was out in America, where we were going to put more than one enterprise on the same bit of ground. So we'd be running like livestock enterprise behind livestock enterprise, sort of stack them all on. And I saw that happening in grassland production more than I did in cropland production. So I thought, well, that's the sort of going to be the platform for doing more of this enterprise stacking.
Yeah.
And as I say that, then I didn't really know what grassland management was all about. So I started off with sheep, and eventually sort of found that I needed to, I couldn't do it all myself. So we needed to look after the next bit of P, which is the people, and get more people involved at a sort of management sort of partnership level, as opposed to me trying to employ them. So that's where we then said, right, okay, let's move out from sheep. We moved into actually dairy, sort of mobile dairy up, and that was on a share farming system.
Let me.
Um,
You're
yeah,
racing. You're racing ahead there, Tim, because that's one area that I really wanted to talk to you about. Because
yeah.
as I say, I've been to your farm, and the partner enterprises that you have are a really impressive element of the system. So just to sort of recap slightly from what you were saying
Mm.
there. This is about, one of the important aspects of bringing onto your farm that you wanted to develop was, getting grassland, getting out livestock into the system. But you didn't have the skills, you didn't have the knowledge or whatever, I suppose, and so you would look to other people to bring that in. Would that be the right sort of?
Yeah, that's pretty fair.
Yeah,
But the really critical thing that is also added to that is that because the systems we were going to implement, they're not turnkey. They're not. You can't pick a book up and say, right, that's how you set up a mobile dairy.
yeah,
We needed someone that had a bit more entrepreneurial flair and freedom to
yeah,
actually make this stuff work. So I say quite often that if I had a herd manager trying to run the system and anything went wrong, there's plenty of herd manager jobs around. They could say, well, I'm off now. Um, in the system we've got, in the share farming system, we both get our money from the milk check. So I don't get a rent. He doesn't get a wage. We both are focused on milk production and getting, and then also focus on the cost of that milk production. So our approach is completely different because of this partnership agreement, and that
right,
allows us to be a bit much more entrepreneurial, much more reactive, and we come at we fix problems. The solutions generally come from our heads instead of our wallets. So we think about, okay, what can
yeah.
we do about this before we start spending money? Which is a slight difference, but a really important difference between employing someone and having this sort of partnership model.
Yeah, no, I guess absolutely. I like the way that the idea of the thoughts on how to progress it come from the head and not from the wallet. That's a really important. And so, did the idea? Did you say, right? I want to go down the mobile dairy unit, and then you look for someone to do a mobile dairy, or how did that actually? Because I've seen the
No.
mobile dairy. This is really
Yeah.
important. Just to sort of put everyone in the picture here. So what happens is that it's kind of like a crop rotation, but it's a dairy that's part of your crop almost, and it's fascinating that so you will have the dairy there on a grass lay, and actually it's a mobile dairy in the middle of the field, that you have there for what is it, a year or a couple of years in that field or
So the field will be the field will be in grass for 4 years, and there'll be
right,
young stock the first year, dairy the second 2 years, and the fourth year, sorry, is for silage and hay for overwintering, and then it goes into the arable rotation.
I
So
see,
yeah, and the parlour itself moves every 2 days, so it moves
right.
around wherever the rotation is. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a really impressive system. But did you set out to have that system, or did someone come to you and say, "Look, I've got this
Mm.
idea"?
No, so I set out to have a rotational grass in our
Yeah,
system, and then opened up the opportunity for someone to pitch ideas or people to pitch ideas to me through the Farmers Weekly. I put an advert in looking for.
right,
I said I've got this much grass. Come to me with ideas. But the
right.
key thing is it had to be able to move. So it had to. I wanted the same land use across the whole land. So when we used to have dairy up until 2002, all of our fertility is around the buildings, and it's not. So the extremities of the farm, we took all the straw and put it through the buildings and spread it around the buildings. Um, so it was mixed farming, but it kind of was doing the worst
Yeah,
of mixed farming because you had fertility hotspots and fertility weaknesses. So we wanted to know if we're going to do this, it needs to be everywhere. So we need to be able to access and use the land for the same thing all over the land.
yeah. Now we'll talk about the people aspect of this in a minute, but I want to focus first on the soil health aspects, and you've touched on it there. That you were looking to build the soil health around the whole farm, and this was one route to doing it. I mean, just sort of describe your soils, if you will, Tim, and why this is a particular concern of yours.
So our soils would be we're all over chalk, and that goes into the aquifer, which has got high nitrates. which is now which has become a problem. So we've got the chalk, and then we've got some clay cap between the chalk and the topsoil, and that clay cap will go from sometimes nothing to maybe 5 foot, depending on which part of the field you're stood in. And then we've got, I don't know, about 8 inches of topsoil on top of that. So it's
Yeah.
pretty thin most places.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do is use nature to try and expand those horizons of the topsoil and the subsoil and the base rock and that sort of stuff. And nothing really wants to live much in chalk. But what we found is we can actually get some roots and penetration into chalk through dung beetles, through them burrowing into the chalk, and then the roots follow the burrows down, and you then start to get this like dark zone coming out from where the dung beetles have gone in, and then all of a sudden you can start to very slowly access the minerals and nutrients that are in the chalk, and you start to get like a hazing. So I always used to see like chalk and then topsoil, and now I see like chalk and then like a grey zone and then topsoil. So we're just trying to build that zone all the time.
Yeah, no. Now, so you've first got involved with one of the BOFIN projects, I think last year, which was when we were looking into arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. This was a project that we were running with the Crop Science Centre. They were very interested to know in the levels of AMF in soils across the country, and what, and different systems and so on and so forth. So we put the word out. And you were one of the farmers who applied and sent in your roots for analysis on AMF. I think, Tim, can you remember what your results were? By the way, what your
not off the top of my head. I know they were pleasing because they were, we were doing all the things that the Farmers Weekly say we're not supposed to do, like ploughing and things like that. But actually they weren't. They weren't as negative as we thought they might be from ploughing and power harrowing and that sort of stuff. So it was pleasing to know. It's kind of what I was observing in my own head is actually when I walk around the farm and I look at our ploughing and stuff coming from a no-till background and start thinking, actually, I'm not sure we're doing as bad as I thought we. As I thought we were, if you know what I mean.
So
or as we've been told we are.
Let me just go over that. So when you said you came back into the farm in the mid-90s, you were already no-till on the farm. But what have you changed that in recent years? Then have you gone back to the plough? Well, I suppose perhaps
through organics. Yeah.
But
because we were we had the grass and lay, we had to take the grass out.
Yeah.
And that we found that was the most effective way is with the plough, to be honest. And then I monitor the plough, and when I'm sat on the plough and watching what we're doing, I either go through with the plough once or I go through with like min-till stuff and churn and churn and then hope that it's sunny and then hope that the everything dies and bakes out in the sun, then I move it again and hope that it does that all again. And actually it's really inefficient and daft way of trying to do things in an organic system. But what then I sort of start to reflect, and people say, oh, well, where before when I was told about ploughing, is you take the soil and you're going to turn the whole lot upside down, and that's going to just destroy everything. And I look at my ploughing; I'm a pretty average plougher, and quite often there's like some of it doesn't go all the way down, some of it stays raised top near to the surface. And I think, well, that's all like all that colony of fungi and all the rest of it is still in that bit, still near the surface. I'm pretty sure it'll recolonize and move out. And I think now that level of disturbance, I don't think is a bad thing. I like to sort of use analogies, and I look at our woodlands and the hazel woodlands, and I see okay, if we've got a hazel woodland that's never been cut, it just dies pretty much. Everything gets really big and just sort of looks rubbish. You go through and coppice it, it looks amazing. All that new growth comes, keeps coming, and so to me, is that's sort of intentional destruction, but sort of being mindful about how you do it and what the impacts of what you do, and not overdoing it. And when we're ploughing, we're always ploughing in like a green material now, because being organic, the farm's full of some people call them weeds, but we'll say a cover crop. But there's always something there that
Yeah.
you're plowing in. There's always some food. So yeah, I kind of
Well,
changed my
no, I
opinions.
have heard that from others that that when you look at things like the AMF content of your roots in an organic system, then even though you're turning the soil and you're apparently doing more damage, if you like, to the soil, actually it's temporary damage, and the and especially if you're not plowing too deep, you're not moving the soil too much, then it does retain that structure. Well, I mean, I don't know whether there's been much scientific research into this to back it up, but that's certainly what people I've said to
Yeah.
anecdotally.
Well, I walked across our farm all winter. I do farm walks every fortnight,
Yeah,
and we go out and we do like water infiltration tests and all that sort of stuff. And I've just been blown away this winter. We've had a really wet winter, and the soils on the slopes, rolling ground, is kind of stayed where it's put,
hmm.
especially on the ploughed land. And wherever I've seen water running and moving soil, it's been on um, like mint till, or even on the grassland where we've gone in with a vehicle and it's followed some tracks, all that sort of stuff. And the ploughed land, because I plough it, I don't roll it, and I don't drive on it in the autumn. I don't get tempted to put any weeders for it. It seems to be much more resilient through the winter, and
Yeah.
yeah. So that's kind of what I've observed, and
Mm.
yeah,
Now,
and that's why actually trying to understand all this by doing the BOFIN work
yeah,
and putting our soils against others is like links. It's like, okay, well, it doesn't ring true to what I'm reading in the farming press as to my practices. So actually, what's going on? And so as well as doing BOFIN work, we're doing other work. Yeah, we've been doing Yen as well to try and understand more about what we're doing nutritionally,
yeah.
and then working with like Wild Farmed a bit and doing like SAP tests and that sort of stuff. So we're trying to just get a bigger picture, a bit more understanding about where we're going with
Oh,
it.
there's so many things I want to talk to you about, Tim. But before we move off the soil health aspects,
Yeah,
let's stay below the ground for the moment,
yeah,
because you're involved in one of our projects, Truth, which is thriving
mm,
roots underpinning total soil health. You're one of our root rangers, and we're asking you to take soil cores from across one of your fields. And also some more AMF sampling that you're doing, and also looking at the actual soil itself. So as part of the project, we're testing a sensor from PES Technologies. They call it the soil nose. The idea is you put a sample into the sensor, and then it can look at the volatiles that come off the soil and give you a very accurate idea of what's in that soil. The bacteria, the fungi, and so on and so forth. We're calibrating the sensor. We're sending the samples into John Innes Centre, where they're looking at the DNA analysis of these samples, so that we can calibrate that sensor. That's one aspect, as I say. Also looking at the AMF, doing more samples of the Crop Science Centre, looking at that. And then, as I say, these soil cores, which is literally taking a core about 15 centimeters by about 8 centimeters of a plant, sending the whole intact core into Nottingham, where they put it through a CT scanner, and you get these really cool ideas of what the rooting looks like of your plants. So you're taking part in that, and I believe the pack, we sent the pack out to you recently, Tim. Have you received it? Is it all there? Have you?
yeah, yeah. I've got boxes and boxes of bits and bobs all over the place. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
So
I mean, again, why? Was this something that you were particularly interested to do? I mean, what are you hoping to find out?
mm. um, so I guess so far I've done a lot of this stuff on a hunch.
Yeah,
Like done the thinking, put the grass in, doing it on a hunch, and now I think we're in that stage where we want to actually have some knowledge to back up that hunch.
yeah,
So yeah, anything we can do to gain more insight for me is really important. And also, I didn't set out to be an organic farmer when I left college back in 2004, and I was probably pretty rude to organic farmers for quite a while,
mm,
until we sort of start to think. But now, doing this organic farming has been really fascinating. and I think just I'm really keen to put our soils up against conventional soils just
Yeah.
to understand, like, how is it all, you know, it, what is going on there, and yeah, I've often thought of chemistry as the muck and mystery because I don't understand any of it.
Yeah.
Whereas others would say what we do is muck and mystery, but I just think, well, the chemistry doesn't make sense to me, and so for me, it feels like it's probably doing stuff to the soil. So
Yeah.
I'd like to see if it's true or not.
You need the
Yeah.
biology to fit in there, so which to make sense of what it's doing, and I hope that's what we're finding out here. I always say we know so much about what goes on above the soil,
Mm,
but the soil surface, but precious little about what's going on beneath the soil, and particularly the relationship between the plant roots and the soil as well. I mean, that one aspect, I have to say, I'm really interested with this, Tim. So we've got 10 root ranges, and you're one of I think at least 2 organic farmers who are taking part in it, and it's going to be really interesting to see how your systems stack up against it. I'm not saying in a competitive element or anything like that, but just looking at the differences and understanding what they are. But I think within your so there's a field that you're looking at in particular where you're doing the sampling, and I think that's a field of first wheat, I think, isn't it?
yeah, so it's first week after oilseed rape. Yeah,
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 and you're doing a trial within that field. I think is that right?
yeah. So we're sort of exploring. So one of the things I've found, I did crop trials last year. Um, in spring crop trials, just looking at different varieties, and there was a massive yield difference between the trials and the actual the rest of the field.
Yeah.
I didn't really understand that, so I'm quite keen, and I'm quite aware that we've got the yield potential is there because those crop trials actually they yielded as good as sort of conventional sort of trials. And for me, it was spring oats, and they did sort of 4.9 tons a hectare, and for me that was really acceptable. But then the rest of the farm was doing 2 tons a hectare of oats. So it's like there's got to be something going on here. So now I'm on a quest to try and find out, well, what is that? So in that field, we're using some trace elements and humic acids
Right.
on the main field, and not with it. It's got some amino nitrogen,
Uh-huh.
foliar sort of amino nitrates in some of that product as well, at a real low rate. But yeah, so we're doing a side by side comparison on
Right.
there to see
So
what.
so what you've got trials specifically, what tramline trials within the field where you're
So
looking.
within that field, yeah, we've got
Mm.
tramline trials, and then we've got somewhere else on the farm we've got half hectare variety trials, and species trials, all next door to each other as well. So yeah,
Yeah. So just looking at those specifically, what are the products that you're looking at within your root ranger field? I'm
it's,
presuming
uh,
you're
it's,
hoping that they're
it's,
going to be doing something to the roots.
yes, so, yeah. So Citadel is
Right.
the product we're using. Um, so
Mm.
what you say about roots is amazing, isn't it? And the rhizosphere,
Yeah.
and when we start realizing that, like, depending on the amount, but up to 50% of the carbohydrates that we create in photosynthesis is exuded through the roots. Kind of everything, even if you do foliar applications, that's being channeled back in through into the root zone.
Mm.
So yeah, it'd be fascinating to see what's going on there.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. Well, I mean, we could talk all day about soil and root health, but I want to move on to the above ground work that you're also doing. And so you're involved in another project that we've got running at the moment, which is the NCS project, and you're a pulse pioneer, I believe, within that. So this is looking at growing pulses. We all know well. Pulses are supposed to be good for the soil, aren't they? And good for your system, good for the rotation. But the problem with pulses was we get inconsistent returns. Now, this is a
Yeah,
project. It's a £5.9 million DEFRA funded project, 4 years. BOFIN is involved. And we're getting people involved in on-farm trials to try to improve the consistency and the yield benefit and across the whole rotation. understand more what it's contributing across the whole rotation of an arable system. And we're also doing livestock trials as well to look at how we can move away from a dependence on soya and introduce more homegrown pulses into livestock diets, but specifically on the arable trials. So we started this year. We've got 10 pulse pioneers, and you're one of them, Tim, doing trials with pulses on your farm. Now, I believe that you're already doing some work with, is it Organic Research Centre
Research
on
centre.
your farm?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
talk us through what you're doing with them.
So we are in. They've got a series called Live Seed. So that is testing out different seeds. So we're doing oats, wheat, and beans. So live oats, live beans, and live wheat. So yeah, we're trying different varieties, and it's really fascinating because what we're finding is things that almost the growers didn't really know about their varieties because they haven't put them in organic situations. So we're finding things like weed suppression and tolerance and different wheat varieties, and we're seeing how, like, just looking at beans next door to each other and how different bean varieties next door to each other and how they cope in a weedy situation, and some are weedier than others. And
So it's
what
sorry,
I've also done.
is this
Gone.
companion cropping you're talking about, Tim?
No, this is all. They're all single varieties at the moment.
Right.
So single species.
Yeah.
Um, companion cropping is something I practice on the farm a bit anyway. But no, but if we are going to do companion cropping, then we probably it's useful to know about the individual varieties and what their timings are and how that all works.
Yeah.
But also and their characteristics. And there's some thinking that which is going to be really interesting with the Pulse Pioneer thing, is that, like, if you've got a smaller plant, is that going to leave more nitrogen? Is the rooting doing the same and actually taking less out of the system, but the nodules are still the same? Or if you've got a really big plant, it's taking a lot, is that taking more nitrogen and leaving less behind? And, so looking at the legacy effect of those legumes is going to be really important between different varieties and different species as we go forward on that.
Yeah.
And the other thing we're doing on ground is purposely leaving areas very bare so that we can then see how the beans have competed against what was there in the background as well. Because we found last year different varieties of beans were competing with competition differently as well.
Yes.
So there's quite a
So
bit going on.
now within the Pulse Pioneer trial, so we're asking all of our Pulse Pioneers to have an area of peas or beans, and then either within that same crop or a field nearby, have a field that isn't in peas or beans, which is the sort of comparison field, and then they would come into the same crop in the following year, and we can compare the difference that the pea or bean crop has made. So I think within your field, because you've got that trial going on, it's part of the trial area that's grown to oats. Is that right? Yeah, and then and we're going to be monitoring that through the yen, which you mentioned just a minute ago. You've had experience. So this is the Yield Enhancement Network that's been run by ADAS for over 10 years now, I think. And more recently, they've introduced the Pulse Yen, looking specifically at beans. So peas and beans. So you've been involved in the Pulse Yen before. Is that right, Tim?
So yes, I've been involved with the Pulse Yen. Last year was the first year, and I did cereals I think the year before as well. So I've been sort of just tickling away with Yen. I found it really fascinating. Always thought of Yen when I read the Farmers Weekly, and the Yen winner was the chap that put on, I don't know, gazillions of nitrogen, kilos of nitrogen and everything else. But I went to Ireland on a tour and looked at some oat crops out there. And this farmer had been doing Yen. He was a conventional farmer, and looked at the report. And there's probably about 2 lines that talks about nitrogen, and all the rest are talking about, the physicality of the crop, the trace elements of the crop, and the time. When did it tie? What's the biomass? All that sort of stuff. And I thought, hang on, those are all the tools that me as an organic farmer. Those are all my levers that I can have some influence on. Like, I can't nitrogen, but all the other things I can. so I need to know what's going on there. So that's why it was a really important thing for me.
Yeah, and so what specifically what are you looking at within your crop? You said you've got different varieties within that. Are you going to be comparing one variety against another within your field?
Not on yen,
Oh,
no.
right, fine.
I'm just looking at. I'm literally just looking at the just how they're just trying to understand. Well, what's going on? I
Mm,
think an element of just trying to get a benchmark, just trying to understand what's going on
right.
consistently across the farm, and then we can then start to, okay, is this better or worse than that? Do you see what I mean? Just trying initially just trying to get understanding of how it all works.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think within organics there's just so little knowledge really about agronomy and nutrition and that sort of stuff that kind of starting not from scratch at all,
Yeah.
but we're not starting from you know, it hasn't had the amount of money that conventional farming's had since the war piled into it. So we're obviously on the back foot.
Now, going back to what we were talking about earlier, the partner enterprises that you had, and you told me, the relationship. It's a different relationship with your partners than you'd have with an employee, and this is, this goes to your second, or well, one of your key pillars, which is about people. Um,
Mm.
I mean, it's a fascinating system that you've got with your partner enterprises, and I've seen your website as well. And I think you're not just doing it on your own farm. You're looking to help other people start these partner enterprises. You mentioned that you found out about it when you went on your Nuffield. So I mean, was that kind of a light bulb moment? Did you specifically set out to look for this particular aspect of it? Tell me how it came about.
No, I didn't at all. No, I was kind of looking. Not, I wasn't even actually looking at sustainability when I went and did my Nuffield
Okay.
travels, and it sort of
Okay.
that was kind of the light bulb for me in the first place. But no, so and then I'd say I discovered this much more collaborative style of farming, the partnership based farming, and
Who
it
was
made
that, by
so
the
much
way?
more sense. Chap called Joel Salatin in the
That's right.
US,
Yes. Yeah, and I think
Polyface Farms.
he's been quite an advocate for these systems. I think he's quite well known
Yes,
in
yeah.
his own rights for what he's doing. And I mean, and it is this idea of partnering with other farmers, sharing the resources. But you've each got your own visions as to how you're taking it forward, but they're very, very complementary visions. I think isn't that right?
So that, yes, and that's like the dream, and a
Yeah.
lot of people have seen the dream and thought, let's try and do this, and then actually the journey to get to that dream is quite a a rugged road. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so for me, it was okay. Well, if we want to start to do all this stuff and embrace this, the natural energy and all that sort of stuff, we need a much more diverse business. Um, we need to see there's like this an abundance of opportunity, which we see on the farm now, and we need to be able to capitalize that abundance of options there are on the farm. Um, but the only way we can tap into that abundance is through having more people with this sort of mind,
Mhm.
sort of entrepreneurial mind that can actually take the ideas and run with them. Because I just don't have the mental capacity
Yeah.
to run with all these different ideas of seizing the abundance that we've got. Um, so it makes perfect sense that other people should do it. And if those other people are going to come and run the projects, I don't really want to be the person that says, right, I need a chicken farmer to come and tell me about chicken farming, because I'll end up running it
Yeah.
instead of them. So that's why through our pitch up scheme we've left it to be very open. Like, come to us with your ideas, and then we can see how they can merge into the business. And as opposed to me saying, right, I want someone to pitch to me their egg laying idea or their coffin making idea or whatever it is that I think we should be doing. It's kind of, we're still learning how to do this.
Yeah.
We might be completely wrong. Maybe we have to go back and say, right, these are definite ideas that we want. But my original thinking was that we need to be let people come with their ideas and own that idea themselves.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
It's so long as it integrates into the farm, then it's
You mentioned pitch up, which I think
yes.
is an idea that you've been developing. Just tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so that's what you were describing on our website. So that is looking for these people to come and join us, so
Yeah.
pitch their ideas to us. We originally on the website we just had like a big, just come and talk to us all the time, and it was very hard to actually narrow that down into anything useful. So we've confined that all into November, the month of November, and that's
Right.
the month when people can then pitch their ideas to us. And then other people have said, "Oh, what you're doing is a really good idea. Can we do that on our business?" And then we've said, "Okay, well, why don't we join forces to promote this whole discussion about working on farms and setting up businesses on farms." So that's how it's moved into a
I see.
bigger state.
No, that's really interesting because one of the main things that BOFIN is all about is very much it's about collaboration and farmers working together. The farmers work well. Farmers learn best from other farmers, and you. It sounds to me, Tim, like you've got the perfect solution there. That you've got ambitious, go-ahead, driven farmers who are coming onto the farm onto the estate and bringing their ideas with them and driving them forward. And it's where you get that sort of knowledge sharing aspect that's really the sort of sweet spot of progression and innovation. That's our experience with BOFIN anyway, and that's what we're trying to do with all of our with our communities. So those are the communities on the Farming Forum and the Knowledge and Farming area, where we're looking for farmers to share their experiences and talk about those. And that's very much part of being a Pulse pioneer and being a route ranger, to bring those ideas onto the forums and to share them. But is that when you the pitch up thing, is that just specifically for Kingsclere? That you're looking to have partners at Kingsclere, or is that something that you're rolling out over for other people?
No, so last year we had a estate up in Fife, up in Scotland, as
Right.
well, Balcaski estate as well. So so last year it was a tour estates. What we're hoping to do this year is to find another couple of similar businesses that would
Right.
maybe like east and west as well. But I kind of see I don't know if you have heard about the old Michaelmas fairs, when the staff used to go and say, right, I'm looking for a new job, and they always line up and they'd swap between farms, and it was always done on this Michaelmas fair. And I think, well, this pitch up could evolve into being something like that. So just once a year, people with different ideas come and meet the farmers and say, right, okay, these are my ideas, and they pitch them to whichever farmer they want to go to, and sort of work like that. And I think it could be it could be something really cool.
Yeah.
And useful, because like the number of farmers and landowners that say, oh, we're after these new ideas and new entrants, and I think there's almost more farmers than there are actually people with the ideas, sadly, but to get on and do stuff. But there's a definite need for it out there.
No, absolutely. I mean, one of the interesting things about your system, I mean, we talked a bit about the mobile dairy earlier on, but if I remember rightly, you have a chicken enterprise or a laying enterprise that then comes in after the dairy. Is that right? Is that
So yeah, we did, and quite openly say that we haven't anymore, and that is a result of people. Just the chickens, and they made fantastic eggs. Everything worked really well. But
as I understand it, so the dairy moved through, and obviously you've got all the cowpats and so on the grass, and then the chickens move in, and they pick their way through the cowpats, and so on, pick out the grubs and things like that. So you get great eggs from that.
So amazing eggs, and also reduced food costs. So when the chickens, so we recorded it when the chickens were near the dairy, so we're normally trying to work about 3 or 4 days behind. When they were in that area, the food reduction just went down. Some people said a half, but let's say a third to be generous. But but it's certainly really reduced. And the quality of egg, because they're outside and pitching around and eating bugs and everything else, the actual quality of eggs and the health of the birds was fantastic. And it came down to well, we really need to get this system to actually scale properly and be mobile enough to follow behind the cows,
Yeah.
um, and that's where the people element fell down, and that's going to happen. That is part of
Right.
being a pioneer and doing that. That's
So, so
it is, we don't have.
are you on the lookout for another someone who'd be interested in taking up? So it's the same
Yeah,
sort of
definitely.
idea,
Yeah,
isn't it? That you
yeah,
move the hen houses, if you like, around the farm behind the dairy.
yeah. And so what what it achieves for a new entrant is they become a farmer, a landless farmer,
Yeah.
and yeah, that's really quite cool. So what we see with the dairy is that we've got a dairy farm there that if we fell out for whatever reason or something horrible happened to us with that relationship, the dairy farm can just pick up and move to somewhere else, and that all that investment that has been put into a dairy farm belongs to that owner,
Yeah.
that the owner of the dairy farming business, and so I think it's like a really like brilliant concept for this new entrant type thing, and I think the chickens was no different really, but it takes a bit more thinking around.
Yeah.
Um, we almost struggle, I think, with people that have come from doing that industry. So if you get like someone that's been milking cows forever, they're like, I can't understand why you want to move a milking parlor. It doesn't make sense. But if you get someone that says, I want to go into milking, and I want to do it over like loads of acres, and I see that there's X million hectares of arable land that are crying out for grass, and if I could make a system that I could mix my grass into an arable system, they're like, yeah, I'll have that, and that's just that different mindset.
Yeah.
So that's but it could be chickens as well, and actually the two could complement phenomenally, and yeah, but it just
Right.
takes a bit of a different mind. Just
Is there another step you can take it? I mean,
oh,
what comes in after the
endless.
chickens?
Oh, yeah, but you could go anywhere.
Yeah.
You could have pigs, you could have rabbits, you could have glamping. You could, you name it. You could have anything. You can
Yeah.
just once you start to think about stacking and mobile infrastructure, you can kind of do whatever you like, and it's less of a regulatory burden, let's say,
Mm.
because you're not fixed. So
Yeah.
we don't need planning permission for a dairy because we're not a dairy.
Absolutely.
We don't
Very
need a
slurry
slurry
talk
lagoon for
about
our
it. Yeah.
dairy because we're not fixed. So it kind of things change.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
it's a brilliant system, but I want to move on because we've been rattling on for ages, Tim.
yeah,
But to your third one, which was well, the planet
planet.
element.
Yeah,
Well, it was people,
yeah,
planet, profit. So it was actually your second one, but we're moving on to that one now. And so just tell me, tell me what this means to you. What does planet mean to you, Tim?
yeah. So I think within some of the holistic management training we do, we think right, we need to do our resource management and we need to do our environmental management. And resource management is how do we manage our resources we got at the moment. So how do we manage the soil, like the earthworms and today's sunlight. And environmental management is all about how do we ensure that there's sunlight and rain and all that sort of stuff in the future. So for me, if we don't think about the planet, don't think about that future resource and managing that, then we're kind of we're not sustainable
Yeah.
at the end of the day. So what I want to do is create a farming system that uh, improves the planet, improves the environment as we go forward, and the organic farming system seems to be doing that. We seem to be improving our bird numbers, improving our wildflowers, improving that, and generally for me that's resilience.
Mm.
When we start to have that much more diverse business and that much more biodiverse sort of landscape, then we've got much more resilience. We don't really know where climate change is going to take us and all that sort of stuff, and the more resilience we've got, the better.
Yeah.
I think back to um, the situation in Australia, when we had so they had droughts for years, and then they had all the bushfires, and then they had loads of rain for another year, and then they had an epidemic of rodents. So they had mice and rats everywhere, right? And so because the whole system was just so undiverse that as soon as you change the climate somewhere, you end up with a boom bust scenario. And
Mm.
so then they had all these mice and rats going around because there was not enough snakes and cats and anything else and predators basically to eat the mice and rats. And they got to the stage where they were putting like their beds were in buckets of water to stop the rats from getting onto their beds, and that's what.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's the dead opposite of where we're trying to get by improving diversity.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
So for me, it's a business. I always think back to business, but you know, our environmental responsibilities from a business point of view, I mean, they're clear to see. If we want to be going, you know, yeah, I guess if you're selling your land into a housing estate, they might be a bit different. But for for those of us that aren't and intend to carry on farming, then the more resilient we can be, the better, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess one thing that you mentioned earlier was the sort of cyclical
Cyclical.
nature of it. That it's about having a system where the waste of one system is actually the feed of another. And if you look at
Mm.
your system and the way you run what you're doing there with the mobile dairy and so on, it does all feed into itself quite neatly, I guess, doesn't it?
No, no, it absolutely does. Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And I know you're really impressed with our when you came, or not. I don't know if impressed, but quite shocked to see a coffin on our table
That's
one
right.
time.
Yeah,
And
just to put
yeah,
things into context. Yeah. So, I walked into Tim's boardroom just next door to your office there, and there in the middle of the table, as Tim said, was a coffin. And I mean, that's not something that you come across at every meeting, every farm. Can you just put it into context, Tim? What was
yeah,
a
sure.
coffin doing on your table?
Yeah, no, so it's an example of this cyclical thinking, really. But so we developed a green burial site on the farm, where we would open up a plot, and for burial, and then once um, the guest, I suppose, I'm not really sure what we call our burial people, but once we buried the
Hardly a
coffin,
visitor.
we visitor, yeah, we would then uh, yeah, we'd then plant a
Resident,
tree
perhaps.
on the resident. Yeah, a resident. Let's go for resident. Yeah. So we'd say yeah, we do our year's burials, and then in February we would then plant hazel trees on top.
Mm,
And for me, right, if we're planting hazel trees, and what we explain to our customers is that when those hazel trees start to grow, we'll then come back and coppice them, and then use that coppice to make coffins to then keep
right.
that cycle going.
Yeah.
So that for me, that's like this whole little micro economy just going on the in just around this one business. And that's for me, that's this whole cyclical thinking,
Yeah.
and it's a public good, and it's taking people in, it's returning them back to the earth and turning them to trees, and the whole sort of thing. And we're trying to think in that same way across the whole of the estate. Everything we're doing is trying to think, well, what are the byproducts, what are this, and how can we make them to co-products, how can we add value to them.
Mm.
And that's how I think we can make a much more resilient system, and kind of, I don't know. People can listen to me and think we're being anti, a bit left and a bit soft. But to me, in this capitalist world that is full of inflation, we've got to do something every year that improves our lot. And so I think we're being quite capitalist in our thinking, but in a different way.
Well, I think, I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of the finances on these sorts of businesses, Tim, but I have heard that these green burial grounds, they're not, they certainly stand on their own 2 feet, and they can be quite a lucrative enterprise for the right business. And I think I've been to
Mm.
your burial ground, it's really nicely set out. And there's a parking area and so on and so forth. And you can imagine, the loved ones can go there and visit the tree, and so on and so forth
Mm.
going forward. So it sort of ticks all the boxes of great
It
enterprise.
does, and it's a lot more viable, and especially once you get the business flowing,
Yeah,
than going to the Forestry Commission and to the government and to people to pay for putting up woodlands. Actually, you know,
yeah,
taxpayers for putting woodlands. Actually, we're making a business out of creating woodlands, and I think that's. I'd much prefer
yeah.
to be doing stuff through the business, through private enterprise, than through subsidies. Although SFI is a new subject, but
Yeah, no,
not sure we've got time
absolutely.
for that
Uh,
one.
by the way, I might point out that that coffin on the table I visited, it didn't have a body in it, just in case anyone was worried about that. It was empty. But listen, we've this is about all we've got time for, Tim. But I mean, we could rattle on all day talking about farming and what you're doing at King's Club. I do
Mm.
think it's a fascinating business you've got there. If anyone wanted to be involved in Pitch Up, by the way, what would be the right route?
So look us up on our website, which would be there's a few, but look up Kingsler Estates
Yeah.
Limited on Google or any other browser that you'd like.
I
Yeah,
had a look.
and then there'll be links onto the Pitch Up website from there.
Yeah, I had a look earlier on, and yeah, Tim's right. So if you just stick it into Google or whatever, Kingsclere Estates and Pitch Up, then it comes up, and there's all the information on there if you want to find out more about it. Really,
Yeah.
really fascinating businesses that you've got involved with there, Tim.
And then sorry, Tom. Yeah, sorry. People often come to us and ask about farm visits. So we do a tour every fortnight. So there's a link to our Eventbrite page, or you can just look up an Eventbrite, and that's literally just walking around the farm, looking at basically doing agronomy. I'm too lazy to do agronomy, so I need to invite people along to actually get me out into the field. So that's what that's all about.
Partners as well.
No, it's just I'm just rubbish at crop walking because I always get too busy. So I thought, well, if I get other people along, then I have to go crop walking. So that's part of my fortnightly walks.
Brilliant.
And then actually, excitingly, we're doing the monitor farm system for the next 3 years. So there's a big opportunity to monitor what we're doing going forward. So
is that what AHDB monitor farms?
Yes,
you're a monitor farm going forward, are you?
Yeah. So we start in beginning of next month. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic! So if you want to visit the Kingsclere Estate and get involved with some of the activities that you're doing, then one of the best routes, I guess, would be to get involved with your well, if you're in the right area, of course, which is in Berkshire, by the way.
Hampshire, actually.
Sorry,
you got
Hampshire.
it all wrong, but
Right.
right on the border.
Okay,
so I can forgive you that.
Yeah,
but no, I mean that's the thing. I think that for me, the monitor farm was going to bring the discipline to bring all these tests and everything else together and try and put them into some kind of structure.
And I believe also, Tim, you've got a conference coming up on your farm as well. Is that right?
Yeah, so we're hosting the National Organic Conference this year. So it's on the 2nd of July, and it's actually we're doing more collaboration. Actually, we've got the National Organic Conference and the British Grassland Society, both on the same day for the farm tour. So a really good opportunity to show like the mixed farming system and to get people from grassland and crops and everyone to come together and look about sort of low input organic systems.
If you want to find out more about that, where would you go to?
You'd type in again the National Organic Conference. Organic Farmers and Growers, OF&G would tell you, and the British Grassland Society would also. So those sort of 3 avenues. And I'm sure it'll be on we'll put it on our Instagram, Facebook page as well, so you can follow that. So
no, absolutely fantastic. Well, that leads me neatly onto my last question, a passing shot, if you like, Tim. I mean, where do you think all of where you're taking things and so on, or where do you hope all of this is leading us? And perhaps, what are your hopes for UK farming from this?
It's happy, young, vibrant, and financially stable. I think that's that's what we want for, isn't it? And thanked, actually. I'd love to be thanked. I'd love people to come along and really recognise the hard work that farmers do, and to say thank you.
Yeah.
I just recently hosted a chef on the farm, and he quite rightly said, in the olden days, people say you're a chef, and they would be like, oh, whatever. And now when you say you're a chef, you're like, oh my God. And then, especially like the high end chefs, people are just blown away by the fact that someone's a chef. And I think actually, if we can, change that whole approach, and people actually think, oh my God, you're a farmer. That's amazing. You do this amazing stuff, and thank you. If we could have that, would be pretty cool.
Absolutely. Well, look, Tim, thank you so much for joining us today on the BOFIN Buzz. It's been a fascinating journey, and I have to say, if anyone listening does get the opportunity to go to Kingsclere and have a look round, do some crop walking with Tim, whatever, then do take the opportunity. It's a fascinating estate. Everything that you're doing there is really, really interesting as well. Yeah, I look forward to receiving all of your samples and all the results that you're getting from all the work that you're doing within BOFIN as well. And if anyone wants to hear about that, then of course do join the Soil Circle on the Farming Forum, and also Pulse Pet as well, where Tim, you will be putting up your results and discussing it and so on. I hope as the year goes on. Great. Well, look,
Yeah.
Tim, thank you so much, as I say, for joining us. And join us again on the BOFIN Buzz. Thank you very much, and goodbye. Great. Thank you very much, Tim.
That's right.
Now, before you close out, there should be a little
Yes.
thing on your screen saying that you're uploading or something.
Yes.
99%. 99%. Oh, that's good. That so what happens is that this records locally, and then it uploads, and then Sky knits it together, or I think it's the software that knits it together.
Fine.
But the important thing is not to log out until it's finished uploading. So
yeah,
I think
okay.